The rain had fallen over Brookminster village with a steady, rhythmic insistence all day, turning the narrow cobblestone lanes glossy under the glow of the street lamps. The villagers, ever sensitive to omens and quiet oddities, claimed the storm had a peculiar temperament, one that whispered that something was about to happen. Whether they believed this or simply enjoyed repeating the story depended on whom one asked. At precisely 7 o'clock in the evening, the great iron gates of Brookminster Hall groaned open, and a motor car, a dark, unfamiliar Bentley, rolled smoothly along the serpentine drive. No one in the village recognized it. Even the reclusive house staff of the vast estate seemed perplexed when the vehicle came to a halt before the columned entrance. Out stepped a man no one had ever seen before. Tall, impeccably dressed in a grey coat, gloves, and polished shoes, the stranger carried with him an air of self-assurance that bordered on arrogance. What he lacked, however, was luggage. "A Mr. Alistair Rowan," he announced crisply to the butler who answered the door. Expected. Expected. That raised the first of many eyebrows, for Brookminster Hall had only recently opened its doors again after nearly 2 years of disuse, ever since Lady Seraphina Dunbridge, widow of the late Lord Percival, returned from her extended sojourn in Italy. She had returned quietly, without so much as a word to her usual social circle, and resumed residence alone, save for a skeleton staff and occasional visits from her distant cousin and financial advisor, Mr. Gregory Larchwood. And now, this stranger was here, with no prior announcement, claiming to be expected. The butler, Mr. Fulham, was a man who had learned long ago not to question his employers aloud, but even he hesitated before stepping aside to allow Rowan entry. A fire had been lit in the grand parlor room, casting tall shadows against the high walls and stately portraits that lined them. Lady Seraphina herself awaited the visitor, draped elegantly in a deep blue silk gown, the very image of composed aristocracy. She rose from her armchair as Rowan entered. "Mr. Rowan," she greeted him with a cordial nod, though Fulham noticed that her fingers tightened visibly around the head of her silver cane. "It has been quite some time." The stranger bowed slightly. "My lady." No further explanation. No apology for his appearance. No warm reminiscence of the past. Their interaction lasted scarcely 3 minutes before she dismissed her staff for the evening. The butler obeyed, but the moment he was out of sight, he could not help but linger just beyond the corridor, listening to the murmur of their conversation. He heard nothing, not even their footsteps. It was as though the two simply vanished into the hush of the old manor. At precisely 8:30, Mr. Rowan departed just as unceremoniously as he had arrived. The Bentley glided away into the storm, its tail lights swallowed by the mist, and by morning he was dead. The body was found at dawn near the old stone bridge on the outskirts of the estate. Constable Merriweather, who made the discovery while on his routine patrol, first believed the man to be a sleeping drunk, or so he told the townsfolk later with a sheepish grimace. But it quickly became apparent this was no ordinary vagrant. His clothes, though damp with rain, were exquisitely tailored. His gloves, though muddied by the soft earth, were of fine calf leather, and his wallet, still neatly folded in the inside pocket of his coat, contained no money, not a single note, not a lone coin, not even so much as a bank receipt. More curious still, however, was that he carried no identification of any sort except a single calling card. Blank, no name, no address. Just a faint watermark bearing the symbol of a quill pierced by a key. The coroner later concluded that Rowan had died sometime between 8 and 9 o'clock, within minutes of his departure from Brookminster Hall. There were no signs of violence on his body, no bruising, no lacerations, no evidence of struggle. Yet Constable Merriweather insisted there was something wrong about the scene. Something too neat, he repeated to anyone who listened. People don't simply lie down in the middle of a storm, on a bridge no less, unless they've been placed there. But what puzzled him even more was the absence of any valuables. No money, no personal effects. And yet there was nothing to indicate robbery. It seemed the stranger had simply arrived in the village penniless and left the world the same way. The constabulary approached Brookminster Hall at once. Lady Seraphina, though visibly shaken, confirmed that the stranger had indeed been a visitor. She claimed he was a distant acquaintance of her late husband, and that he had come to inquire about an old debt Lord Percival once owed him. A debt? Merryweather repeated skeptically. And yet the man had no money on him. Her answer was cool and non-committal. He claimed he wished to verify the debt, not collect it. The constable left unsatisfied, but he had no grounds yet to press further. Still, something gnawed at him. Something Lady Seraphina was not saying. By evening, a message was dispatched from the hall, written in Lady Seraphina's unmistakably elegant, looping script. It was addressed to Monsieur Hercule Poirot, Whitehaven Mansions, London. The letter was brief, composed with the brittle restraint of someone maintaining dignity in the face of embarrassment. Monsieur Poirot, a man died this morning, not long after leaving my home. The constabulary questions little, but I fear more is at stake than is immediately apparent. His presence here was unexpected, his request peculiar, and his death unsettling. I believe the truth is obscured beneath something far more dangerous than a simple claim of debt. I implore your assistance. Come at once. Lady Seraphina Dunbridge Poirot received the letter 2 days later, and upon reading it, he immediately packed his small, immaculate suitcase and prepared to journey to Brookminster village. For a man who borrowed no money, yet arrived seeking debt, had died with pockets as empty as the life he left behind. And to Poirot, that contradiction alone was enough to whisper, "Murder." It was just after breakfast when I found Poirot standing by the window of our shared sitting room at Whitehaven Mansions, holding a letter in both hands as though it were a delicate specimen under examination. His posture, ramrod straight, feet neatly aligned, mustaches quivering with contained importance, told me before he spoke that this was no ordinary piece of correspondence. "My dear Hastings," he announced, turning toward me with eyes alight, "we have been summoned." "Summoned?" I repeated, folding my newspaper. Good heavens, Poirot, are we dealing with a foreign dignitary or merely one of those society matrons who can't decide whether she has misplaced her pearls or her sanity? Poirot gave a soft sniff. "You trivialize, mon ami. It is unbecoming. This," he wiggled the letter, "comes from Lady Seraphina Dunbridge." I frowned. The name was familiar, but just out of reach. Poirot supplied the missing details with a flourish. The widow of Lord Percival Dunbridge, a woman of impeccable reputation and considerable refinement. "And what does she want with you?" Poirot paced a thoughtful little circle. A man, unknown to her staff, though evidently known to her, visited her and shortly after was found dead. He carried no money, none at all, and yet he purported to come to verify a financial debt. I whistled. "Sounds dashed queer." "Precisely. And Lady Seraphina fears something more sinister than the constabulary suspects. Hastings, a man may forget his umbrella, but no one forgets all money, no?" I conceded that point. Poirot tapped the envelope lightly. "We travel this afternoon. Pack lightly, s'il vous plaît." I've learned over the years never to argue with Hercule Poirot when he adopts this tone of quiet certainty. Within 2 hours, we were seated in a first-class railway compartment, rattling northward toward Brookminster village. Poirot was uncharacteristically silent, save for a brief mutter about the deplorable state of British train upholstery. His mind clearly labored upon the peculiar circumstances of the stranger's demise. I ventured a question as we crossed fields glistening from last night's rain. "Poirot, do you think this man, Rowan, was it, was murdered. Poirot shook his head slowly. I do not yet think, Hastings. I observe. I reflect. It is only when the facts arrange themselves into the pattern neat that I permit myself to think. I let him be after that. Poirot, like a cat in the sun, is best left undisturbed during his meditative spells. We arrived in Brookminster village shortly before 3 o'clock. The place had the quaint charm of a postcard. Stone cottages, curling chimney smoke, a church spire just visible through trees, and a cluster of shops whose windows gleamed invitingly under the pale winter light. Yet beneath its charm there seemed an odd tension, a hush that one would not ordinarily expect from so picturesque a setting. Poirot noticed it too. "A village on its guard," he murmured. "Always there is the whisper before the storm, Hastings." As we made our way to the inn where rooms had been arranged, villagers paused in their tasks to look at us. A milkman even halted his cart, staring openly before pretending to inspect a wheel. I felt like a circus exhibit. "Is all this for you, Poirot?" I asked. He lifted a modest eyebrow. "Of course." After depositing our luggage, we set off toward Brookminster Hall. Our route led us past the old stone bridge where the body had been discovered. Poirot paused mid-path, examining the damp ground with his usual pointed delicacy. He crouched, not touching the earth, naturally, and narrowed his gaze. "The rain," he said, "washed away many sins last night." "You mean clues?" "No, I mean sense, Hastings. Clues remain always. One must merely look." How he found them, I shall never understand. Brookminster Hall itself rose at the end of a sweeping drive, an imposing structure with tall windows and ivy clinging to its stone facade. A butler greeted us with stiff courtesy. "Monsieur Poirot and Captain Hastings, her ladyship awaits." We entered a richly furnished parlor room where Lady Seraphina stood by the fireplace. She was a woman of striking poise, tall, elegantly dressed, with silver threads woven through her dark hair. Her eyes, though, carried a weight, fear mingled with pride battling uncertainty. "Monsieur Poirot," she said as we bowed, "thank you for coming so quickly." "It is my duty, Lady Seraphina," Poirot replied, assuming the air of a priest receiving confession. "Tell us everything from the beginning." She nodded at Mr. Gregory Larchwood, who stood beside her. A thin man with spectacles and a nervous manner, he introduced himself as her financial advisor and cousin. He clasped his hands tightly as Lady Seraphina spoke. "Mr. Alistair Rowan arrived unannounced 2 nights ago," she began. "He claimed to be renewing an old debt owed by my late husband." Her voice trembled only once, but Poirot caught it. "You knew him previously?" "A long time ago," she admitted, "before my marriage, but I never expected to see him again, and certainly not asking about money." Larchwood cleared his throat. The man provided no documentation. It was most irregular. Poirot inclined his head. "And after he left?" Lady Seraphina looked away. "He was found dead scarcely an hour later." Poirot folded his hands. "And you told the constabulary, what, madame?" "That he came to ask about a debt. Nothing more." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "But that is not the truth complete, no." Her hands tightened around the silver head of her cane. "No," she whispered, "it is not." The room seemed to grow colder. For a long, difficult moment, she stared into the fire, gathering strength. Then at last she said, "Alistair Rowan once asked me to marry him." Poirot did not blink, but I confess, uttered a most undignified, "Good Lord." Lady Seraphina continued, voice low, "And now he is dead, and I cannot help but feel that I am somehow entangled in it." Poirot leaned forward gently, moustaches lifting with purpose. "Madame, I assure you, Hercule Poirot shall untangle everything." And with that promise, our investigation began. If there is one thing I have learned during my years with Poirot, it is this: a murder, no matter how subtle or cleverly disguised, always radiates outward like ripples in a pond. Those nearest to the center invariably reveal something: guilt, fear, secrets, or the peculiar fidgeting one associates with concealed knowledge. And Poirot naturally notices every tremor. No sooner had Lady Seraphina revealed her past connection with the late Alistair Rowan than Poirot suggested, in that gentle but commanding manner of his, that we meet everyone residing at Brookminster Hall. "The house is like the stage, Hastings," he whispered as we followed Lady Seraphina into the corridor. "Already I see the actors. Now I must know their roles." We entered a long gallery where portraits of Dunbridge's past looked down at us with the sort of self-importance only aristocratic oil paintings possess. Chairs had been arranged in a loose semicircle near the tall windows. 3 individuals awaited us, 2 sitting stiffly, 1 perched like a decorative bird ready to take flight. Lady Seraphina gestured gracefully. "This is my staff." Poirot bowed courteously. I gave what I hoped was a reassuring smile, though I suspected it came off as more awkward than comforting. The butler stepped forward first. 1. Mr. Fulham, the watchful butler. He was a tall, severe-looking man with iron-grey hair and the expression of someone deeply insulted by the state of the modern world. His coat was immaculate, almost unnervingly so. "Mr. Fulham has served the Dunbridge family for 27 years, Lady Seraphina explained. "A long time," Poirot said approvingly. "Loyalty is a treasure." Fulham bowed his head. "My lady has always had my loyalty, sir." Poirot's gaze flickered. "Just a second, but enough to signal interest." "Always, monsieur." "Yes," Fulham said quickly. Too quickly, I thought. Poirot filed it away. 2. Miss Clara Wren, the companion. The young woman sitting at the far end of the chairs rose uncertainly. She appeared to be about 30, pale, slender, with soft brown hair tucked behind her ears. There was an anxious tremble about her movements, like a violin string stretched a little too tight. I serve as Lady Seraphina's personal companion," she stammered. "Reading, correspondence, that sort of thing." Poirot bowed slightly. "And you were present when Mr. Rowan arrived?" "Yes, monsieur. I greeted him in the foyer before calling Lady Seraphina." "You had not met him before?" "No," she answered, eyes dropping to the floor. "I had never heard of him." Poirot leaned toward her with a kindness few people realize he possesses. "And yet he unsettled you, did he not?" She blanched, her hands locked together. He seemed intense, as though he were holding something tightly inside himself. I can't explain it." Poirot nodded softly, satisfied. 3. Mr. Larchwood, the cousin with a ledger. Though we had already met Lady Seraphina's cousin Gregory Larchwood, he now took his place among the suspects with a marked air of discomfort. He adjusted his spectacles twice before speaking. "I was not present when the man arrived," he said. "I was in the study preparing a summary of Lady Seraphina's accounts." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Yet you say you found it irregular that he brought no documentation regarding this supposed debt." "I only meant, that it was unprofessional." "Or inconvenient?" Poirot asked quietly. Larchwood's cheeks flushed. "I have nothing to hide, sir." No, of course not," Poirot said with unconvincing sweetness. I nearly groaned. Lady Seraphina, standing by the fireplace like a poised statue, finally spoke. "I thought it best, Monsieur Poirot, that you meet them all. Anything further they can supply, we will leave in your capable hands." Poirot clasped his own hands in front of him. "Très bien, now we begin." He stepped to the center of the semicircle and turned in his usual dramatic manner, as though preparing to address the jury in a courtroom drama. "I ask only simple questions," he declared. "To each of you, a different question. You will answer honestly, because deceit, mes amis, is the one thing I cannot tolerate, unless, of course, it is done well." I bit back a laugh. The staff looked terrified. Poirot addressed Fulham first. Monsieur the butler, what time did Mr. Rowan leave the hall? 8:30, sir. Precisely. You watched him depart? Yes, sir. Poirot leaned forward, and he appeared. How? Fulham hesitated. Calm, determined, as though he had unfinished business. Ah, Poirot exclaimed softly. A man who leaves with purpose rarely stops to die on a bridge. Fulham stiffened. Poirot moved to Miss Wren. Mademoiselle, what struck you most about Mr. Rowan? She swallowed. His eyes. Poirot nodded. Describe them. They were troubled, and yet somehow expectant, as though he believed coming here would resolve something. Poirot murmured, "Très intéressant," and turned to Larchwood. Monsieur Larchwood, did Lady Seraphina know the full nature of this debt? Larchwood flinched. I can't say. You cannot, Poirot echoed, or you will not. I mean only that she did not confide in me. Unusual for a relative who manages her finances, n'est-ce pas? Larchwood's mouth opened and shut like a startled fish. Well, perhaps. But her ladyship is entitled to private matters. Poirot let him go, though he gave me a significant glance. To Poirot, a person's discomfort is often more revealing than their words. Just as Poirot was preparing to dismiss the group, Lady Seraphina's cane tapped sharply against the floor. There is something else you should know, she said. Every head turned. She took a breath. Mr. Rowan threatened me. Miss Wren gasped. Fulham muttered something under his breath. Even Larchwood's face fell into pale astonishment. Poirot, however, did not react at all. In what manner, madame? He said, she whispered, eyes hardening, you owe me far more than you owe your late husband. The phrase hung in the air like a cold wind. Poirot stepped closer, voice soft. And you did not tell the police this? No, to admit such a thing. She trembled. I feared it might cast suspicion upon me, and I swear I had nothing to do with his death. Poirot placed a hand upon his heart. Madame, I believe you, but I also believe this. A man does not make such a statement without reason. He turned to me. Hastings, we must find that reason. As we prepared to leave the hall, Fulham approached. I did not mention something earlier, he said quietly. Poirot's eyes glinted. Ah, the conscience speaks. Fulham lowered his voice. Before Mr. Rowan left, I saw Lady Seraphina crying. Crying, I repeated, startled. Yes, sir. I've seen her upset before, but never like that. Poirot regarded Fulham closely. And she asked you to say nothing of it? Fulham nodded. Poirot touched his mustache thoughtfully. Merci. That is extremely helpful. We stepped outside into the fading light. The wind carried the scent of approaching rain. Poirot stopped at the foot of the steps and spoke in a low, decisive tone. Hastings, there is a secret in that house. Several, in fact, and we have met only the players. He turned toward the village. Now we must find the motive. The air outside Brookminster Hall carried the crisp bite of gathering rain as Poirot and I walked down the long gravel path toward the village. The great house loomed behind us like a silent sentinel, filled, if Poirot's expression was any indication, with more secrets than inhabitants. For several minutes, Poirot said nothing at all, his gaze fixed on the ground as if reading invisible hieroglyphs in the gravel. At last he spoke. Hastings, mon ami, observe something for me. I straightened immediately. What is it? Poirot pointed delicately with the tip of his cane toward the path. Footprints, only 2 sets, ours. Yet Mr. Rowan walked this same path less than 48 hours ago. Where are his? Probably washed away by the storm, I offered. Poirot gave me a small, pitying smile. Ah, mon pauvre Hastings. Always the simple explanation. But no, these stones here, they do not hold water. They drain quickly. Something should remain. Perhaps the staff swept the path? Poirot's eyebrows twitched upward. That, Hastings, is the right kind of suggestion. But why would they sweep it? He paused. Unless someone wished to remove evidence. This thought unsettled me profoundly. You think someone from the hall— Shh, Poirot whispered. We do not think yet. We only notice. We continued our walk until the hall faded behind the skeletal winter trees. Presently, the old stone bridge came into view, the place where Rowan's body had been found. The constabulary had long since cleared the area, leaving only muddy banks and the trickle of the stream below. Poirot approached slowly, hands behind his back. Hastings, describe what you see. Well, I said, stepping closer, there's nothing special here now. Just mud, some broken reeds, and that faint indentation over there. Poirot's gaze settled on the indentation. Ah, precisely. Describe it. I squinted. It looks like something heavy rested there. A suitcase, perhaps. No, not a suitcase. Poirot bent down, inspecting it without touching the ground. The shape is too narrow, too upright, like the base of a cane. A cane? I repeated. But Lady Seraphina has one. Poirot gave a thin smile. Yes, she does. My heart thudded. Surely you don't suspect— No, mon ami, Poirot interrupted. Suspicion is premature, observation only. But if Lady Seraphina's cane was here, it suggests she left the hall after Rowan, and that she did not tell us so. Before I could respond, footsteps approached from the road. A stocky man in a constabulary coat emerged, tipping his hat to us. Constable Merriweather, sirs, he introduced himself. You must be Mr. Poirot. Poirot inclined his head. And you discovered the body, I believe. Yes, sir. I was doing my early rounds. Found him lying right over there. He pointed at a spot several feet from where Poirot had been examining. Still warm, if you'll pardon the detail. Poirot accepted the detail with the solemnity of a priest receiving sacrament. You found no signs of struggle? Poirot asked. No, sir, not a scratch. Looked almost peaceful. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Peaceful, dying in the rain at night? The constable shrugged helplessly. Begging your pardon, sir, but people die in stranger ways. Poirot studied him. Tell me, constable, in cases of robbery, do thieves often steal only money? Only money? Merriweather frowned. No, sir. They grab whatever they can get. Watches, wallets, personal effects, anything of value. Just so. Poirot tapped his finger lightly against his mustache. And yet Mr. Rowan's belongings were untouched, his clothes intact, his watch still on his wrist. Strange thing, that, the constable admitted. Almost like someone wanted him found without money. Poirot's eyes glimmered. Exactement. We returned to the village with the constable escorting us part way before diverging. The streets had grown busier since earlier that morning. A baker shouted greetings to his customers. A young boy hurried past with a fishing rod. Two elderly women leaned together conspiratorially, no doubt discussing new details of the mysterious death. The inn, the Silver Lamb, sat quaintly at the village square. We pushed open the door to find the sitting room lively with afternoon patrons. At once, conversations hushed, eyes turned. Clearly, Poirot's appearance had spread like wildfire. We sat at a table near the window. Poirot ordered tea. I opted for a pint of ale, feeling the need for fortification. As our beverages arrived, a shadow fell across the table. Begging our pardon, gentlemen, came a smooth, confident voice. A tall man approached, handsome, with carefully styled blonde hair and a tailored coat. Name's Charles Redley. I hear you're the detective come to investigate the dead fellow on the bridge. Poirot raised a polite eyebrow. Among other things. Redley slid into the empty chair. I saw him, you know. Poirot leaned forward. You saw Mr. Rowan? Yes, night before he died. Redley took a slow sip of brandy. He stepped into my shop, Redley's Antiques, asked me if anyone in the village needed money. I blinked. Needed money? Redley chuckled. Odd thing to ask, I know. I told him most folks around here get by all right. Then he asked if anyone might owe him something, as if he expected someone to recognize him. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And did they? No, never seen him before. Looked out of sorts, too, like he didn't know whether he'd arrived in the right village. Poirot sat back, steepling his fingers. Très intéressant. Redley rose. Thought you should know. Strange fellow, that one. As he left, Poirot's mustaches rose in satisfaction. Hastings, he murmured. The man who borrows no money asks who needs money. Does this not strike you as peculiar? Decidedly, I agreed. Poirot drummed his fingers on the table. He asks of debts. He speaks of debts, and he dies with no money at all. And Lady Seraphina says he wanted to renew a debt, yet carries nothing to verify it. Poirot's voice lowered. This is not the behavior of a man seeking payment. What is it then? Poirot's eyes glittered. It is the behavior of a man seeking retribution. A chill swept through me. You think Rowan came to threaten Lady Seraphina? Poirot shook his head. He did not threaten. He reminded. Reminded of what? Poirot leaned closer, speaking with rare solemnity. Of something that happened long ago, he said. Something Lady Seraphina hoped was buried forever. Before I could ask more, the innkeeper approached. Telegram for Monsieur Poirot. Poirot tore it open. His eyes widened just slightly. Then he whispered, Mon Dieu. A second death. The telegram, once opened, seemed to suck all the warmth from the little inn. Poirot read it silently, then folded it with the greatest care, as though he feared the paper might disintegrate if mishandled. I leaned forward in anxious impatience. Well, I whispered. Poirot handed it to me. The message was short, brutally so. Gregory Larchwood found unconscious. Foul play suspected. Police request your presence. Merryweather. Larchwood? I exclaimed, but we only saw him an hour ago. Poirot was already standing. Hastings vite. Something has occurred which may change the entire shape of this affair. We hurried through the village and back up the winding drive leading to Brookminster Hall. Rain had started again, thin needling drops that vanished into Poirot's hat, but soaked me thoroughly. When we reached the hall, Merryweather was waiting at the front entrance, cap dripping, face grave. This way, sirs, he said, and led us to a side corridor off the main gallery. Gregory Larchwood lay slumped on a chaise, attended by Miss Clara Wren, who was wringing a damp cloth nervously. Larchwood's head bore a shallow gash. His spectacles were cracked and dangling from one ear. His breath came in small, sharp pulls. Poirot knelt beside him. He will recover. Yes, Miss Wren said tremulously. The doctor just left. He said it was only a blow. A nasty one, but not life-threatening. What happened? I asked. Merryweather answered grimly. Someone struck him from behind while he was in the study. He says he didn't see who, but... He lowered his voice. It seems something was stolen. Poirot's head snapped upward. What? Merryweather held up a small leather-bound ledger. This was found on the study floor near Mr. Larchwood. It's Lady Seraphina's financial book. So? I said. Surely that belongs in the study. Yes, Merryweather replied. But this page... He flipped it open. A thick section had been torn clean out. Larchwood says the missing pages contained records of a private debt Lord Percival owed. To Alistair Rowan, Poirot finished softly. We exchanged a glance. The implications were immediate and considerable. Poirot stood up. Where is Lady Seraphina? In her room, Miss Wren said. She's not well. No, Poirot murmured. I imagine she's not. Merryweather straightened with official purpose. Given the circumstances, sir, I believe a case of coercion is forming. Mr. Rowan arrives about a debt. The financial record goes missing, then the man collecting the debt is found dead. suggesting, I ventured, that Larchwood struck Rowan before he could make his claim. Merryweather nodded. That's what I'm thinking, sir. Poirot's moustache twitched dangerously. And what else are you thinking, Constable? That the man was killed because he came to expose the debt, and Larchwood, being the one handling all the finances, is the most logical suspect. Poirot inhaled deeply, exhaled sharply. The logic of appearances, Hastings, he muttered to me. Always it seduces the authorities. Larchwood groaned then, eyes fluttering open. Poirot bent close. Mr. Larchwood, tell us exactly what occurred. Larchwood's voice was weak but audible. I went into the study to write down a note for Lady Seraphina. While I was sorting through the accounts, I heard a noise, footsteps, then something struck me from behind. He shuddered. When I woke, the pages were gone. Do you know what was on them? Poirot asked. Larchwood hesitated. It was a personal entry of Lord Percival's, a debt written many years ago, not an official one. His face reddened. He owed the money to Rowan, but it was never repaid. Poirot's eyes shone. Why not? I don't know. Lady Seraphina forbade mention of it after Lord Percival's death. She said it was a private matter. Private to whom? Poirot asked softly. Larchwood swallowed. Her and Rowan. Before Poirot could probe further, Merryweather stepped forward. Mr. Larchwood, I'm afraid I must ask you to accompany me to the station for formal questioning. Larchwood stared in horror. But surely you don't think It's procedure, sir. Poirot raised a hand. Constable Merryweather, I advise caution. With respect, Mr. Poirot, Merryweather said stiffly, I believe we have our man. Rowan arrived about a debt. Larchwood handles the money. A debt record disappears, and now he's been attacked by someone, possibly an accomplice, trying to silence him. It fits. Poirot closed his eyes briefly, as if invoking divine patience. Hastings, he said calmly, let us accompany them. The Brookminster station was small, 2 desks, 3 chairs, and an air of earnest provincial authority. Merryweather escorted Larchwood into the interview room, leaving Poirot and me waiting in the front area. Poirot, I murmured, the evidence does seem rather damning. He opened his eyes and fixed me with an expression of pure disappointment. Hastings, I beg you, even for the sake of my poor nerves, do not. Allow the obvious to blind you. The obvious is always the first refuge of the unimaginative. Well, what's wrong with the constable's theory? Poirot ticked point off on his fingers. 1. If Larchwood wished to kill Rowan, why allow the man to leave the hall? 2. Why not destroy the entire ledger? Why tear out only 1 page? 3. Larchwood is attacked. Someone wishes to silence him? No, someone wishes merely to suggest such a thing. But Hastings, mon ami, Poirot said, Larchwood is not clever enough to stage this. That requires flair, deception, drama. His mustache bristled. The true culprit hides behind Larchwood's incompetence like a cat behind a curtain. Before I could reply, Merryweather emerged with a firm announcement. Larchwood will remain in custody until further notice. I believe this is our culprit. Poirot rose at once. You are wrong, Constable. The room fell silent. Poirot stepped forward, his voice unusually sharp. Gregory Larchwood is no murderer. He's a coward, yes. A keeper of secrets, certainly. But not a killer. Merryweather bristled. And how do you know that, sir? Poirot smiled faintly. Because the murderer, Constable, is someone with confidence, someone with control, someone capable of striking a man from behind without hesitation. Poirot paused. And more importantly, someone who knows precisely what is written in the missing pages. Merryweather blinked, but who else would know that? Poirot straightened, eyes gleaming. That, he said quietly, is what we must discover. We left the police station with the late afternoon light sinking behind the rooftops, the sky bruised with clouds threatening another downpour. Poirot walked ahead of me at a brisk pace, his small figure compact with energy, his cane tapping like a metronome marking time in some private symphony only he could hear. I caught up with him as he turned toward the village square. "Poirot," I began, "if Larchwood is not the culprit, what do we do now?" He gave me a look almost affectionate in its exasperation. "We play the game, Hastings." "The game?" "The psychological duel. The battle of the nerves. We allow the murderer to think we are misled. Because a murderer who believes himself safe is a murderer who makes mistakes." I followed him inside the Silver Lamb, where the warm glow of lamps and the scent of baked bread enveloped us. A few patrons glanced up from their drinks, whispering as Poirot entered. He ignored them completely, choosing a corner table and sitting with immaculate precision. "Now, Hastings," he said as the innkeeper brought our tea, "tell me, who do you believe I intend to apply pressure upon?" I thought hard. "Larchwood." Poirot shook his head with theatrical despair. "Larchwood is in custody, mon ami. One cannot psychologically torment a man who is already so tormented by life." "Then, Lady Seraphina," I ventured. "Non," he said sharply. "She withholds the truth, yes. She trembles at a ghost from her past, yes. But she lacks the coldness required for murder." I sighed. "Miss Wren?" Poirot's eyes glittered. "Ah, now you begin to use the little grey cells." But she seemed so timid. "Timidity," Poirot said, stirring his tea, "can hide many things. Fear, devotion, resentment, and occasionally, guilt." I frowned. "You believe Miss Wren attacked Larchwood?" "Perhaps." Poirot's voice was maddeningly calm. "Or perhaps she watched, or perhaps she merely knows more than she dares admit. In any case, we must unsettle someone specific. And who is that?" Poirot placed his teacup down with deliberate care. "The one with the most to lose." Before I could ask further, the inn door opened. To my surprise, Miss Wren herself entered, cloak tight around her shoulders, face pale but determined. When she spotted us, she hesitated only briefly before approaching. "Captain Hastings," she said softly. "Monsieur Poirot." Her hands twisted nervously. "May I sit?" Poirot gestured elegantly to the chair. "But of course." She sat, trembling slightly. "I needed to speak with you, both of you. What happened to Mr. Larchwood has frightened me terribly." Poirot leaned forward. "Ah, mademoiselle, I can imagine. The blow to his head, the torn pages, so dramatic, yes?" She nodded weakly. "I cannot bear the thought that someone in the house could do such a thing." Poirot's gaze deepened. "One becomes accustomed to such possibilities when living in a house of secrets." She flinched. Poirot saw it instantly. "Mademoiselle," he said gently but sharply, "tell me, what is it you fear?" Nothing," she whispered. "Non," Poirot said. "Not nothing, something. A truth you are afraid to speak." Miss Wren's eyes darted toward the inn windows, as if expecting someone to burst through them. "It is not my place to say," she murmured. "I'm only a companion." Poirot did not relent. "You are more than that. You are a witness, a confidant, and perhaps, mademoiselle, an accomplice." Her breath caught sharply. "No, I would never—" Poirot raised a calming hand. "Then tell us what troubles you. I assure you, silence is far more dangerous than truth." She wavered. Tears gathered at the edges of her eyes. "It's Lady Seraphina," she whispered. "She has been different since Mr. Rowan came. I heard them arguing in her sitting room that night, quite fiercely. She said something like, 'I will not let you destroy me.' And he responded." She swallowed. "He said, 'Then repay what you owe me.'" Poirot nodded slowly. "I see. But I don't know what it meant," she continued. "Lady Seraphina cried afterward." "She never cries." Poirot's voice softened. Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. She rose abruptly, as though the admission had sapped her strength. Please find the truth quickly, before something else happens. She left in a hurried swirl of cloak and anxious footsteps. I looked at Poirot. Well? Poirot gave a slow, satisfied smile. She's frightened. Good. Good? I repeated. Poirot, the poor girl. Hastings, he said patiently. Fear loosens the tongue. She knows more still. She will reveal it soon. I sighed again. And who is the one with the most to lose? You haven't said. Poirot dabbed his lips with a napkin. Consider, mon ami, who benefits from Larchwood being suspected? Who knew Rowan's arrival threatened to expose something? Who hovers near Lady Seraphina with just enough authority to manipulate matters? Before I could answer, someone approached our table. Light footsteps, confident posture. Mr. Charles Redley, the antique dealer. He smiled with the ease of a man accustomed to admiration. Evening, gentlemen, he said. Terrible business with that Larchwood fellow, eh? Poirot eyed him thoughtfully. Indeed, terrible. Redley sat without being asked. I always said Larchwood was a slippery type. Never trusted him. And you know what they're saying in the village? That Rowan wasn't the first stranger to come asking questions about the Dunbridge family. Poirot went still. Oh? And who told you that? Redley chuckled. Word gets around. Villagers talk. Poirot leaned back, folding his hands. And you, monsieur? You always listen? Redley shrugged. A man in my line of work hears things. Poirot's mustaches curved slightly upward. Tell me, he said softly. What exactly did you hear about Lady Seraphina? Redley hesitated. Just half a second, but Poirot caught it like a hook. Oh, nothing scandalous, Redley said quickly. Only that she was involved with someone long ago, before her marriage. Poirot tilted his head. You seem unusually well informed. Redley smiled tightly. Business requires one to understand people. Huh? Poirot murmured. So you understand Lady Seraphina well? Redley froze for the tiniest moment. Poirot saw it. I saw Poirot see it, and Redley, clever Redley, saw that Poirot had seen it. He stood abruptly. Well, must be going. Busy evening. He left the inn with a swift, restless stride. Poirot watched him go, eyes shimmering with intent. Hastings, he said at last. There goes a man who fears what I might discover. You suspect Redley, I whispered. Poirot did not answer directly. Instead, he whispered, the murderer is feeling the pressure, and soon he will make a mistake. The next morning dawned beneath a sky of deep grey, the kind of colour that warns of storms still gathering strength somewhere out of sight. I descended the stairs of the Silver Lamb, to find Poirot seated at our breakfast table, immaculately groomed, moustaches perfect as a pair of symmetrical commas. He examined a boiled egg as though interrogating it. Poirot, I said, rubbing my eyes, you look like a man expecting news. Oh, I'm expecting it, Hastings, he replied with maddening certainty. But whether it arrives by telegram, constable, or gunshot, I cannot yet say. Gunshot? Poirot sighed with theatrical patience. A figure of speech, mon ami, though given the agitation of our murderer, I do not exclude the possibility. Before I could respond, the innkeeper hurried in. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, there's been another incident at Brookminster Hall. You're asked to come at once. Poirot sprang to his feet like a cat awakened by a mouse. You see, Hastings, the news arrives. We reached the hall within 20 minutes. The place, already somber by nature, now held a tension that vibrated in the air like the taut wire of a violin. Miss Wren met us at the entrance, pale as milk. It's Lady Seraphina, she whispered urgently. She's missing. Missing, I exclaimed. Poirot pressed forward. Explain, mademoiselle. Miss Wren clasped her hands tightly. "Her bed wasn't slept in. Her room is in disarray, and someone broke the lock to her writing desk." Poirot stiffened. "Show us." We followed her up the grand staircase. Lady Seraphina's bedroom, though elegant, now bore the chaos of intrusion. Drawers half open, a chair overturned, scattered sheets of paper littering the floor. Poirot approached the writing desk. The lock had been pried open with force. Splintered wood framed the gap. Inside, the drawers were empty, every document gone. "What papers were kept here?" Poirot asked. "Personal letters, private records," Miss Wren said. "Nothing the household ever saw." Poirot nodded. "And when did you last see her?" "Last night, just before she retired." Miss Wren's voice quivered. She seemed more anxious than usual. I offered to stay with her, but she insisted on being alone. Poirot turned to me. "Hastings, examine the windows." I did so, pulling back the heavy curtains. The latch was unbroken, the glass intact. "No sign of forced entry from outside," I reported. Poirot muttered, "She left of her own will or was lured." Just then Merryweather arrived, breathless. "Poirot." The gardener found this by the east path. He held out a delicate item wrapped in cloth. Poirot unfolded it carefully. It was Lady Seraphina's silver cane. There was mud caked near the base and clinging to its tip. Something darker. Poirot sniffed it lightly. Blood. The constable's voice tightened. "We are searching the grounds, but, well, the implication seems clear." Poirot rounded on him. "Do not jump to conclusions, Constable. Blood can tell many tales. It may be hers, it may be another's, or it may be merely the residue of an earlier accident. But she's missing." "Yes, and perhaps hiding," Poirot said sharply. "A woman who fears exposure might conceal herself deliberately." Miss Wren's voice was barely audible. "You think she's hiding from Rowan's death?" Poirot studied her. "Or from whoever killed him." The young woman gasped, nearly sinking into a chair. Poirot touched her shoulder lightly, not comfortingly, but as though testing her reaction. "We must continue," he said. Poirot insisted we examine the library next. Lady Seraphina's cousin, Larchwood, handled most documents there. Yet now that he was in custody, the room felt abandoned, hollow in its stillness. Poirot wandered slowly, eyes tracing the towering shelves. "Hastings," he murmured, "observe this section. Something is missing." I scanned the shelves. "They look quite full to me." Poirot tutted softly. "Full, yes. Balanced, no." He touched 2 books near the center. "These have recently been shifted to fill a gap. The dust tells the story." "What was here?" I asked. "A box," Poirot said. "Or a case. Something flat, rectangular. Removed hastily." "And why remove it?" Poirot's eyes grew distant. "To prevent us from seeing what it contained." He paced the length of the room, muttering in French, pausing occasionally to adjust a misaligned object. Finally, he stopped at a bookcase near the far wall. "Here," he whispered. He ran his fingers along the edge, then pressed lightly on the underside of the 3rd shelf. With a click, a panel swung open. I jumped. "A secret compartment." Poirot smiled. "Every old English estate hides them. They are as common as bad tea." Inside the compartment sat a single item, a faded photograph. Poirot lifted it reverently. The picture showed a younger Lady Seraphina, no more than 20, standing beside a man who could only be Alistair Rowan. Her expression was filled with something raw. Fear, sorrow, longing. It was difficult to tell through the blur of age, but the emotions were unmistakably intense. Behind them stood a small iron gate, half open. Poirot stared at the photograph for a long time. "A gate," he murmured. "A symbolic thing, Hastings. The opening of choices, the closing of others." "What does it mean?" Poirot pocketed the photograph. "I do not yet know, but the murderer knows," and Lady Seraphina knows." "And now she has vanished," I said softly. Poirot nodded, "which means she is either running from the truth or running toward it." We searched the remainder of the room but found nothing else. Poirot asked Miss Wren to fetch Lady Seraphina's house coat to see if she had taken anything with her. When she returned, she held a folded piece of paper. "It was in her coat pocket," she said. I didn't open it. Poirot took the note delicately. The envelope bore no name. Inside was a single sentence written in Rowan's sharp handwriting. "When the gate opens, the debt will be paid." A chill ran through me. Poirot. What gate? But Poirot's expression darkened. "The gate in the photograph," he said quietly. "A place they both knew, a place tied to the debt, and perhaps," he lowered his voice, "a place tied to death." A shout came from outside. A gardener burst through the library door. "Sir, Monsieur Poirot, we found something in the woods." Poirot straightened. "What is it?" he demanded. The gardener's voice shook. "A body." The gardener led us along a narrow trail branching east from the Hall grounds, a path worn only by years of quiet footfall and the occasional roaming deer. The morning's light, filtered through skeletal branches, formed pale beams that seemed to guide us toward something dreadful. Poirot remained several paces ahead, moving with a swiftness I seldom saw in him, cane tapping a purposeful rhythm. We rounded a bend, and there it was. A body lay crumpled near the base of an old elm, half hidden beneath fallen leaves. Miss Wren gasped sharply behind me, and Merryweather muttered a curse. Poirot approached slowly, kneeling with reverence. For one awful moment I feared it was Lady Seraphina, but as Poirot gently brushed aside the leaves, the truth emerged. It was not Lady Seraphina, it was Charles Redley, the antique dealer. His once handsome face was ashen, his fine coat torn at the sleeve. His eyes stared upward in a frozen tableau of horror. A thin trail of dried blood lined the side of his head. No other injuries were visible. "Dear me," Poirot murmured. "Redley has met an end decidedly less polished than his shoes." Merryweather knelt beside him. "Bludgeoned," he muttered. "Same as Larchwood. Similar wound, at least." Poirot's voice was calm, almost too calm. "But fuller, Constable. More decisive. This was not meant to stun. This was meant to silence." Miss Wren trembled violently. "Why would anyone kill him? Mr. Redley had nothing to do with Lady Seraphina." Poirot turned a measured gaze upon her. "Au contraire, mademoiselle. Monsieur Redley had a great deal to do with Lady Seraphina, though the precise nature of that connection I do not yet know." Merryweather stood. "So you think Redley was involved? Perhaps he killed Rowan, and someone killed him in turn." Poirot's mustaches bristled. If Redley killed Rowan, he would not have come to the inn last night to chat about village rumors. Murderers do not seek social engagements. "And you think?" I asked. Poirot rose, dusting his knees. "I think Redley knew something incriminating, and someone realized this." He studied the ground with quiet intensity. Then, without warning, he leaned forward and plucked a small object from the leaves. "What is it?" I asked. Poirot held it out for me to see. A silver cufflink, oval-shaped, engraved with an elegant initial. For a moment, I could not breathe. "Poirot, that's the Dunbridge initial." "Just so," he said softly. Miss Wren let out a small cry. "Lady Seraphina's husband, Lord Percival. His name was Dunbridge." Poirot pocketed the cufflink swiftly. "And Lady Seraphina's cane was found near the east path. Curious, no? The dead man bears a Dunbridge initial, yet the Dunbridge lord is long buried." Merryweather straightened. "Poirot, are you implying that Lady Seraphina killed Redley?" Poirot fixed the constable with a glare that could have melted steel. "I imply nothing, Constable. I observe, and what I observe is this. The killer wishes us to look at Lady Seraphina." "And you don't believe it," I said. Poirot tapped his temple. "Not for one moment." Poirot motioned for us to continue deeper into the woods. "We must find the gate," he said. "What gate?" Merryweather asked. "The gate from the photograph," I supplied. "The one in the secret compartment." Merryweather blinked. "What photograph?" Poirot smiled faintly. "One moment, Constable. You will see." We walked another 10 minutes until the trees began to thin, and then, like a relic from another age, we saw it. A small iron gate stood crookedly in a stone archway, both half swallowed by brambles. The resemblance to the old photograph was unmistakable. Poirot approached slowly, raising a hand as though greeting an old acquaintance. "This," he whispered, "is where it began." Merryweather crossed his arms. "What began?" "The debt," Poirot said. "The true debt." He pulled out the photograph at last, showing it to us. Lady Seraphina and Rowan stood just before this same gate. Rowan had a hand on her shoulder. She looked distressed, vulnerable. The meaning suddenly struck me. "Poirot," I breathed. "Rowan wasn't seeking money. He was seeking something else. A promise. A secret." Poirot nodded grimly. "A debt of the heart, Hastings. Not of the purse." Miss Wren's hand shot to her mouth. "Then Lady Seraphina lied to us about the nature of their past?" Poirot turned gently. "She concealed the truth, mademoiselle. Not maliciously, but out of pride and fear." Merryweather frowned. "Fear of what?" Poirot stepped forward, placing a hand on the rusted gate. "The past." Then softly, "And the past has returned with vengeance." Poirot began searching the ground, examining old stonework, moss, the remnants of paths long choked by time. "What are you looking for?" I asked. "A sign," he murmured. "A trace, something the murderer forgot." And then he froze. "Hastings," he said faintly. "Look." I hurried to his side. There, etched faintly into the stone, barely visible through moss and lichen, was an initial. Poirot touched it delicately. "Seraphina wrote, 'This,'" he said. "How can you be sure?" I asked. "I know her hand. Even in childhood markings, the pressure, the curve. It is unmistakable. She marked this stone long ago." Miss Wren whispered, "Why would she carve her initial here?" Poirot's eyes softened. "Because this place mattered. Because this is where Rowan asked her to leave with him." Miss Wren gasped. "You mean she was going to elope?" Poirot nodded. "Oui." And she did not. She chose Lord Percival instead. "It seems far-fetched," I murmured. Poirot placed a hand on my shoulder. "Love, rejection, betrayal, Hastings. These are the most powerful motives of all, but they are not the motive for this murder." "Then what is?" Poirot stared at the initial S as though seeing a web only he could trace. "That," he said quietly, "I will not yet say." I blinked. "You mean you already know?" Poirot gave a tiny, nearly imperceptible smile. "I know enough, but not everything. A murderer is like a painter. They always leave one final stroke unfinished. I must wait for that stroke." Merryweather huffed. "Poirot, this is no time for riddles. What have you deduced?" Poirot turned to him, suddenly grave. "I have deduced that Lady Seraphina is in grave danger." "From whom?" Poirot's voice dropped to a chilled whisper. "From the killer who murdered Rowan, and now Redley, and who seeks to erase all evidence of what happened at this gate so many years ago." Miss Wren trembled. "Then we must find her at once." Poirot nodded. "Oui, but we must be clever. The murderer believes the suspicion lies on Larchwood, or on poor Lady Seraphina herself. He looked at us each in turn. He must continue to believe that." I swallowed. "Poirot, what are you planning?" "A trap," Poirot said simply. "And to catch a murderer, Hastings, the bait must be irresistible." Late that afternoon, under a sky thick with the promise of rain, Poirot announced with complete authority that everyone connected to the mystery must gather in the grand parlour of Brookminster Hall. Miss Wren looked terrified. Merryweather looked annoyed. The staff looked confused. And I, being well accustomed to Poirot's theatrical tendencies, recognized his expression immediately, the expression of a man sharpening his scalpel before the operation. "Poirot," I whispered as we ascended the steps to the hall, "are you certain this is wise? The murderer is still at large. Lady Seraphina is missing, and Redley's body is—" He held up a finger. "Hastings, sometimes the murderer must be reminded that he performs upon a stage, and when the spotlight shines, he trembles." Inside the great parlour, Poirot had arranged the chairs in a perfect semicircle, each seat precisely angled as though placed with surveying instruments. A single empty chair stood directly before the fireplace. Poirot's seat, naturally. He paced the boudoir carpet now, smoothing invisible wrinkles in his suit, ensuring every detail was in order. Merryweather, arms folded, muttered, "Is all this necessary?" Poirot did not even glance at him. Essential, Constable. Every detail must be perfect. Soon the participants entered. Miss Clara Wren, small and trembling, clutching a handkerchief. Mr. Fulham, the butler, spine stiff, lips thin as a blade. 2 housemaids, whispering nervously. The gardener, who had found Redley. Merryweather, trying to feign authority, though clearly out of his depth. And Gregory Larchwood, released at Poirot's insistence, looking pale and utterly bewildered. "Thank you," Poirot began, once all had taken their seats. "We gather because a killer is among us." A shiver passed through the room. Poirot clasped his hands behind him. "A man named Alistair Rowan came to this house with a purpose. He left within the hour and was found dead. A second man, Charles Redley, knew something about Rowan's past here, and now he too is dead. These deaths are not random. They are connected by emotion, by fear, and by a secret long buried." Miss Wren whimpered softly. Fulham remained stony. Poirot continued, pacing slowly. "And now Lady Seraphina Dunbridge is missing." A gasp rose on cue, as Poirot intended. Merryweather stepped forward. "Our working theory is that Lady Seraphina may have fled, or—" Poirot cut him off with a sharp wave. "No, Constable, Lady Seraphina did not run away. She was taken or coaxed by someone who understands her vulnerabilities." "But who—" Miss Wren began. Poirot's hand rose again. "Patience, mademoiselle," he addressed the group. "To understand this crime, we must understand the past. Lady Seraphina and Alistair Rowan knew one another long before her marriage." Larchwood stiffened. "She told me nothing of that." Poirot nodded. "And yet she told Miss Wren, not in words but in tears." Miss Wren flushed. I only heard them arguing, Monsieur Poirot. I don't know what it meant." "But it frightened you, did it not?" She nodded. Poirot stepped toward Fulham. "Monsieur the butler, you served the family for 27 years. You must have known something of Lady Seraphina's attachments before Lord Percival." Fulham's face hardened. "It was not my place, sir." Poirot leaned in. "But you observed, did you not? The late Lord Percival and Lady Seraphina were not always a happy marriage." Fulham inhaled sharply but did not speak. Poirot smiled thinly. "That is answer enough." He moved to the center of the room again. Rowan returned not for money. No, money was but the surface of a deeper wound. He returned for recognition, for closure, for what he believed Lady Seraphina owed him. He loved her. Miss Wren trembled. "Yes, mademoiselle, and she once felt something for him." A murmur rippled through the room. Poirot suddenly turned to Larchwood. "Monsieur, you claimed the missing ledger pages detailed a debt owed by Lord Percival to Rowan." "Yes," Larchwood whispered, "but I never understood why." Poirot's tone sharpened. "You did not understand because it made no financial sense, but symbolically, It makes perfect sense. Lord Percival learned of Rowan's past with Lady Seraphina. Perhaps he paid the man to disappear, to sever that old bond. Miss Wren gasped. You mean the Lord bribed Rowan? Poirot shrugged. It is a possibility, but whatever occurred, Rowan believed the debt unpaid. Fulham's jaw tightened visibly. Poirot saw it. Poirot always saw it. Now, he continued softly, someone feared that Rowan's return would reveal an even greater secret. What greater secret? I blurted. Poirot turned his head toward me, eyes glittering. The secret of what truly happened at the Iron Gate the day Lady Seraphina did not elope with Rowan. Silence fell like a dark curtain. Poirot allowed it to linger before speaking again. At that gate, she chose Lord Percival. But someone else, someone with a stake in that outcome, also witnessed the meeting. He glanced from face to face deliberately. The emotions of youth are powerful. Love, jealousy, betrayal, they do not fade with years, and this crime, mes amis, is rooted in that moment long ago. Fulham's fists tightened. Poirot continued. Rowan's death was not to silence a financial dispute. It was to silence the truth, and Redley died because he uncovered some fragment of that past, something he recognized in the photograph he surely acquired. Merryweather blinked. Photograph? Poirot turned. Oh yes, Constable. Do keep up. He addressed the room. I have the photograph. It was hidden in a secret compartment in the library. Only someone intimately connected with the Dunbridge family's history would know where to conceal it. Fulham swallowed hard. Poirot's voice fell to an almost hypnotic softness. And when Redley saw that photograph, perhaps in an appraisal, perhaps in passing, he recognized someone. Someone who had reason to fear Rowan's return. Miss Wren whispered, Who? Poirot did not answer. Instead, he walked to the center, raised a hand, and declared, There is one among you whose connection to that event is deeper than all others. One among you who believed Rowan's return would destroy everything. The room held its breath. Poirot lowered his voice. And that person, mes amis, is here. Chairs creaked. Miss Wren whimpered. Merryweather's hand drifted toward his baton. I felt my own heart hammering. Poirot lifted a single finger, dramatically, purposefully. And now, he said quietly, I shall bring that person into the light. A collective gasp. Poirot inhaled. And the one who must answer first is... Suddenly the door burst open. A figure staggered inside, disheveled, shaking, eyes wild. It was Lady Seraphina Dunbridge. Her voice cracked across the room. Poirot, stop! You must stop! I know who the murderer is. She collapsed before she finished. Lady Seraphina collapsed so suddenly that for a heartbeat none of us moved. Then Miss Wren cried out and darted forward, while Merryweather and I helped ease the trembling woman into a chair. Poirot alone remained perfectly still, as though he had expected this moment, or some variant of it. Water? Poirot said softly. A maid rushed forward with a glass. Lady Seraphina sipped shakily, her breath coming in ragged bursts. When her gaze finally found Poirot's, terror burned in her eyes. Monsieur Poirot, she whispered, you must stop. You don't understand. I know who killed Rowan. I know why. Poirot knelt before her. Madame, I assure you, I understand perfectly, but tell us, s'il vous plaît. Tell us the truth in your own words. She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead. It is my fault, all of it. Alistair Rowan. I wronged him terribly. Years ago I loved him. Before Percival. We waited. I meant to run away with him, she said in barely a whisper. We met at the old Iron Gate. He pleaded. I agreed. But then, Percival found us. Her breath hitched. Percival threatened Rowan, told him if he cared for me at all, he would disappear, and he did, until... until he came back 2 nights ago to demand I tell the truth, to free him from the shame he believed Percival forced upon him. But he carried no money, I said softly. She shook her head. He didn't want money, Captain Hastings. He wanted acknowledgement, to no longer be treated as a mistake. Tears fell. But I told him no. I told him the past must stay buried, that I could not relive the pain. He left, and the next morning he was dead. Merryweather straightened. So you believe Percival's old dispute caused this? But Percival's been dead 5 years, madam. Not Percival, she whispered. Someone else. Her trembling hand lifted, pointing slowly, painfully, toward Fulham, the butler. A collective intake of breath followed. Fulham did not move. His expression did not change. Only his eyes flickered, the smallest tremor like a candle touched by a draught. Poirot rose gently. Merci, madame. You have carried this truth for too long. Lady Seraphina shook her head wildly. No, Poirot. You must listen. Fulham loved Percival. He worshipped him. He saw Rowan as a shameful reminder of my past. He thought Rowan would ruin the Dunbridge name. Fulham closed his eyes. Miss Wren gasped, clutching her chest. No. Poirot lifted a hand, quiet, commanding. No, Lady Seraphina. Fulham did more than worship the late Lord Percival. He turned to the butler. Fulham, Poirot said softly. You were there the day Lady Seraphina stood at the iron gate with Rowan. Fulham opened his eyes, and something cold and ancient stared back. Yes. You were young, Poirot continued, a servant still learning his place. You adored Lady Seraphina from afar, perhaps more than you ever admitted. You believed she belonged with Percival. You believed Rowan was beneath her. Fulham swallowed. His throat bobbed like a caught fish. Poirot stepped closer, and when Lady Seraphina returned to the hall crying that day, you followed Rowan, did you not? Silence. Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper. You threatened him. A shudder passed through the butler's rigid body. Poirot nodded. You chased him from the estate. And when he reappeared after so many years, when he returned to reopen old wounds, you panicked. Lady Seraphina sobbed. Fulham, why? Fulham answered at last, voice like gravel. Because he was going to destroy you, my lady. He was going to tear apart everything you built. Your marriage, your reputation, your peace. His gaze darkened. And I could not allow that. Miss Wren cried. So you killed him? Fulham shook his head sharply. No, I confronted him. I begged him to leave again, but he laughed. He said the truth would come out whether I liked it or not. He swore he would make you acknowledge him in front of all of Brookminster. He clenched his jaw. So I followed him to the bridge. We argued. I pushed him. He fell, hit his head. Poirot nodded gravely. And died instantly. Fulham's eyes burned. It wasn't supposed to happen. I felt the room shrink around us. Poirot continued his quiet exposition. And Redley? Fulham looked down. He came to the hall the next morning asking questions. Said he had seen Rowan 2 days prior. Said Rowan told him he had enemies here. He hinted he might tell the constable if I didn't answer. And so, Poirot said softly, you silenced him as well. Fulham bowed his head. I struck him in the woods. I didn't think it would be fatal. He crumpled too easily. His voice broke. I never meant to become a murderer. Miss Wren buried her face in her hands. Merryweather stepped forward, cuffs ready, voice shaking. Fulham, I must take you into custody. Fulham straightened, regaining his butler's dignity. I understand. But Lady Seraphina cried out, Fulham, no, you did this for me. Poirot intervened swiftly. Non, madame, he did this for himself, for his pride, for his warped devotion. Murder is never an act of love. As Merryweather led Fulham away, the butler paused and turned back to Lady Seraphina. I would have protected you from anything, he whispered. She could not answer. They left the room, Fulham silent, Merryweather grim. Poirot exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. "It is finished," he said. Lady Seraphina collapsed into tears. Miss Wren comforted her. Larchwood stared into the fire, pale and silent. The hall, long steeped in quiet grief, seemed to sag under the weight of its own history. Later that evening, as we prepared to depart, Poirot visited Lady Seraphina. I stood back as he spoke gently to her. "Madame, you must forgive yourself. The past cannot be changed, only understood." Her voice was a whisper. "He died because of me." "No, he died because of a man who mistook obsession for loyalty." She lowered her head. Poirot offered a soft bow. "I wish you peace, Lady Seraphina." We walked back toward the village under the dim glow of lanterns. The storm finally broke, rain falling in heavy sheets. Poirot held his umbrella rigidly, keeping himself impeccably dry while I trudged beside him, soaked to the bone. "Poirot," I said, "this was a tragic affair." He nodded. "Most affairs of the heart are, Hastings. Do you think Lady Seraphina will ever recover?" Poirot sighed, looking toward the dark outline of the hall. "In time, but hearts break quietly and heal quietly too." We reached the Silver Lamb. Poirot paused before entering, giving me a small reflective smile. "Hastings," he murmured, "it is a curious thing. Men speak of debts in terms of money, but the greatest debts are those of love, of pride, and of regret. They are the ones that ruin us." He tapped his temple gently. "And sometimes, mon ami, they kill." With that, Hercule Poirot disappeared into the warm glow of the inn, leaving the rain and the tragedy behind him.